Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here this afternoon as we develop our inquiry mindset, and each of us seeks to answer the question, how will you enter the classroom a different and more complete teacher than before as a result of our conversation today? I'm Sandy Benton, Field Consultant for the Wisconsin Green Schools Network. Our guest today is Trevor MacKenzie. Trevor is an award-winning English teacher and an instructional coach focusing on inquiry and technology from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Trevor is co-author of Inquiry Mindset, published in 2018, and author of Dive Into Inquiry, published in 2016, both by Elevate Books EDU. We've got a range of abilities in our classroom, and all kids are able in many ways. When we think about some of the educational needs of students who may have individualized special education needs in English language arts, for example, or students who come to us having experienced severe trauma, how do you balance what those kids need within an inquiry-based classroom?
Yeah, I love this slide. Truly, a lot of my work in supporting schools and teachers in implementing inquiry is mapping out how do we get to know our kids? How do we truly get to know them? How do we create relationship? Because that overarching truth in education, that without relationship, everything in terms of learning is futile. How do we demystify how we build relationship and get to know our kids? And I think that happens on day one. I think, the moment they're walking towards our classrooms, how are we inviting them in? And then how are we actually spending time to get to know them better? And in getting to know them better, we're challenging them to get to know themselves better, both in terms of what are their strengths as a learner? What are they entering a learning experience with that they could rely on? But also looking at their challenges. And I like to call them stretches. What are the things that are stretching their thinking or stretching their habits or stretching their learning, that those stretches aren't easy. Sometimes there's some tension there for students. And so part of how I begin the year, each and every year, is I ask my students to partake in a little bit of a learner inventory, if you will, where I kind of ask them to map out a few of those strengths and a few of those stretches. And then throughout an inquiry, we revisit that learner profile, that inventory, so students can not just remind themselves of what they have in their learner tool belt that they could rely on, but also to consider, are they growing in those stretch areas? Are they being challenged enough and they're being responsive enough and my support of them is strong enough that some of those stretches slowly improve and they slowly become something that they could rely on as well as a strength. I truly believe in the power of reflection in learning. And the more we ask our students to reflect on where they were, where they are, and where they need to go to next, and that's different for every student, but that specific question or those three questions, where are you, where were you, where are you now, and where do we need to go to next, I can facilitate that discussion and it becomes personalized for each individual student based on their responses. And then, I track those strengths and those challenges, those stretches throughout the year. And what I mean by tracking them is I'm documenting what it is that they're saying. Maybe it's via a Google form, or maybe it's just pen and paper in my grade book. But I want to revisit those strengths and those stretches throughout the year to support my kids and see if they're actually improving. So, how we build relationship first and foremost, but then how do we strengthen relationship between the student and their learning, if you will? And that sounds kind of corny, but if they're not leaving our classrooms at the end of a school year knowing themselves better as people and as learners, I don't feel like we've done our job as educators. And that truly leads to lifelong learning, if you will. If they leave our schools knowing themselves better as learners, what they're good at, and what are some challenges or some stretches, I think we've done an amazing job. This next book that I'm writing right now with regards to assessment, all too often it's the teacher telling a student, this is what you're good at and this is what you're not good at. It's always the teacher's assessment of learning or the teacher's assessment for learning. And I really propose that there needs to be student voice infused in all of that. It's fine and dandy if we have an impression of what a student's good at and what they're perhaps challenged in, but do the students know that? And can the students identify that first and foremost before we even do a diagnostic or before we even do any learning together? Because kids know themselves really well. They want a fresh start at the beginning of the year. They don't want a teacher coming in with an assessment tool that tells them, this is what I believe you being as a learner. So how do we flatten out that conversation and have the assessment piece be more student driven and reflective? I think that's a really key piece to creating not just relationship, but our students knowing themselves better as learners, Sandy. My website, my social media platforms, those are really great ways to get in touch with me. And I'm very, very much open to that dialogue. It could be a direct tweet, it could be a DM or an email. And if you ever want me to retweet you, just simply tag me in a tweet. And I bring that up because in my global travels, there are 15,000 people who are part of that community of people who are following me on Twitter. And, if I don't have an idea that is going to support you and meet your needs, I'm sure someone in that group of 15,000 does, or at least has something that I don't. And so oftentimes I encourage teachers, tag me in a tweet, and that's our little, secret correspondence that you'd like me to retweet you. And before long, what you'll see is genuine interaction with people from around the world.